Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Holly Hagans, part of the DigitalOcean team and crew. I head up our startup program called Hatch. Some of you have seen It's Hatchening on the web. That's me and a few other people making it hatchening all the time here. Anyways, the Hatch Startup Program is something that we've launched in the fall of 2016, where we now have over 200 partners and about 2,000 startups that are part of the DigitalOcean Hatch community. We're lucky to have some of our Hatch founders here for this next panel, and one of our great partners from Techstars, Alex Itzgold, the managing director of Techstars New York City. Please, round of applause and welcome Alex to the stage with our Hatch founders. Thank you.
Hey guys.
Come on.
I can't do it without you. You gotta get in here. All right. So thank you guys for having us. I know you've been having a lot of interesting and nerdy topics. I saw that you've had a lot of code preceding us. So we don't have the code, but we're gonna talk about a topic that I think is pretty important. We're going to talk about starting to scale startups. And so we've got a great group of panelists. And without further ado, I'd love for you guys to maybe introduce yourselves a little bit, just give a bit of the background on your startup, and then I'm going to dive right in with questions.
Sure. Hi, I'm Don Pottinger. I'm the founder of Lithium Labs. We help online retailers, businesses, understand their customer and grow their revenue through predictive analytics tools, email marketing, and marketing automation as well.
Hi, I'm John Jung, one of the co-founders and CTO of June.ai. We're basically an AI-first email platform. We have a web app, we have an iOS app, still in beta phase, so sign up for our list and test it out for us. Yeah.
Hi folks, I'm Justin Carnegas, founder and CEO of Fanout. We make it easy for developers to build and scale real-time apps and APIs. If you're building an application that needs to display new content to a user without having to hit a refresh button, like a chat app or a dashboard with real-time updates. And we also push data across API boundaries. We're one of the only companies doing that.
Cool. Awesome, guys. Thank you. So I think scaling is kind of like a broad topic, and it touches all facets of the company. I want to start by sort of asking you to talk about, like, how do you guys think about starting to scale your engineering? Like, obviously, as an early stage startup, product and engineering is at the heart of what you do. How do you guys think about scaling engineering in the sort of early days of you starting to scale the business? And let's make it chaotic. Feel free to jump in, interrupt each other, and argue.
So I like the rule of thumb of scale to the next 10x, and so we've built out our systems, and we've actually there's some pains in that too though, because usually you have to wait until your next issue, but it's practical and you can work on your features and not so much about over engineering for too far in advance.
Yeah.
What sort of scale are you guys supporting now? Like, just so that we understand, like you're saying, like next 10x, but like what does it mean specifically? Is it throughput, number of customers that are accessing your stuff concurrently, or like what is actually like scaling for you guys?
For us, it's most about traffic usage. We have this high scale push service. There's lots of people connected to us listening for real-time updates, and any single customer could suddenly spike to thousands of more connections at any moment. And so it's not per customer so much as it is per like usage of customers in total. And so we have an internal bench of of 1 million connections at once, and we're not doing that today, but we'll be ready for it. We wouldn't maybe be ready for 10 million, but maybe.
Cool.
Yeah.
How about you guys?
Yeah, for us, in terms of engineering, I think at the start, especially at the very beginning of things, you want to try to do everything, right? Everyone's a full stack developer. They'll eventually figure out what to do, and then you start hitting the walls in terms of engineering. I'm not that great at front-end developer things, so you got to hire someone else, and start delegating and really trusting your people to deliver. So yeah, in terms of engineering, it's kind of like based on what you need, and always hire people who are better than you at that specific thing. So we've got a data scientist who's a lot better than me at that, so she does her thing. And yeah, in terms of scaling, I mean,
What about the product? It sounds like you guys are processing a ton of email.
Right.
And like even one bad inbox can sort of like derail your software. Like how do you guys deal with that?
Right. So we try to have a controlled pipeline of people coming in. That's number one. But yes, in terms of pipeline, as soon as we start syncing the emails, there's a tremendous amount of emails that come in. It hits a bunch of our different microservices. So yeah, we've got throughput issues. You've got our app is also real time, so you got real time issues. We've got latency issues. So you got to make sure you don't have bottlenecks in your code where it takes a long time to process. So you got to really stay on top of that. Also, there's the issue of complexity. So I mean, if this was built under one repo, it would be kind of crazy. But
Like coupling?
exactly.
Okay.
So we try to again build microservices, single responsibility, and it helps, especially when you just need to scrap it and just rewrite it from scratch to make it perform better. So
Cool. I'm going to come back to microservices. What about you guys? Like, what are some of your kind of scaling challenges on the engineering front?
So in our case, we started by building a monolith, and it was the fastest way to get to market. And a lot of that code was written by yours truly. And some of it was good. Some of it was putting everything together to make it work so that we could get it out the door. But what I focused on doing was making sure that it was modularized. So in lieu of building microservices from the start, you can build a monolith that has modular code that you can then, when you do have time to go back and refactor and rework it, extract that module.
So is it just like when you talk about like modules, you talk about just like interfaces, things have clear defined interfaces and contracts,
Yes.
even though they're all like residing within the same
Yes.
monolith, but like it just makes it easier to decouple it in the
It
future.
does make it easier to decouple, and it also makes it easier to deploy those services to their own bucket. So for example, with our app, we're tracking every visit that someone makes on an e-commerce store. So whether you're an anonymous visitor or an identified visitor, we're tracking what pages you're looking at, what products you're looking at, what you're adding to your shopping cart. So if there's a spike in traffic on any of my customers' stores, that could affect whether
How do you guys
email
deal with it?
service-
Like this could literally be like thousands or tens of thousands of like hits to your back
Yeah.
end, like literally within a second. Like how do you guys deal with that?
Well, it was trial by fire. So
I thought you would say like I just throw some of them out. That's what I would do.
that would be one way to look at it. A lot of it too was learning what to decouple when and
Okay.
figuring out, when there were huge spikes in traffic, maybe I need to stop hitting the database and use more of a caching layer or a queuing service to collect that data and then process it later. So it was a lot of trial by fire, but also learning what pieces to decouple and then breaking them out into separate services and scaling them up and down depending on the traffic
Cool.
that you have.
So talking about scale, like can you guys talk us through like what your current stacks are, and then like where do you guys feel biggest scaling challenges in like coming few months and maybe a year? So like just talk broadly about your stacks, and then like where you foresee you're going to need to like potentially make changes.
Yeah. So my stack is Rails primarily, Ruby. We have MySQL, Elasticsearch, Redis. We're using Docker containers and Docker Swarm. I know it's a Kubernetes crowd, but Docker Swarm right now. So the primary issues that I've had, I've recently moved everything over from Amazon to DigitalOcean in the past six months. So just figuring out what worked with Amazon works differently in DigitalOcean. When I had some managed services in Amazon, I have to now self-manage those, and so there's some hiccups and trials there.
So is that, but that's just sort of, that sounds to me like just infrastructure. That's not fundamentally like scaling issues. It's more just like kind of like translating from one platform to another, but like what are the sort of scaling challenges? I mean, like you're processing so much information, like which pieces break?
Right now, it's the database. So
Okay.
The
So
query,
you guys doing a lot of concurrent writes and
a lot of
reads?
concurrent writes that are slowing down.
What are you guys
emails.
using for your database?
MySQL. So
Okay.
something I inherited, and I was hoping to use Postgres or something else, but I inherited MySQL, and so
Do you guys use replica? Like, do you read and write into the same
Yes.
thing or no?
Well, we have a master and a slave and
Yeah.
slaves that we use. And when I moved over to DigitalOcean, moving from Amazon, I had master and slave set up. But when I moved over to DigitalOcean, I only had one large master. I thought that would be okay.
That would do it.
But it didn't. And you learn that lesson, and then
Yeah.
you're able to use that to build out and figure out what issues
Cool.
you have. In the meantime, you have to deal with the customer issues
course.
that crop up because of that.
So we'll touch on the product scaling and customers in a sec, but I'd love to hear from you guys, like what are your stacks and where do you feel the scaling challenges are in the next few months?
Yeah, sure. We run off of Kubernetes, and we've got a bunch of different Docker containers. We write in Python and Golang. We've got MongoDB, we've got a Redis, got an Elasticsearch, we've got a few other databases and caching layers. We've got front end, like I said, we've got a web app, so we've got a JavaScript. That's actually on a S3 or so that just gets served directly, and we have an iOS client. Yeah.
When you guys are processing email, so let's say you have 4 inboxes, does each one of us get a separate sort of like vertically integrated processor, or do you guys leverage and you basically have like queue is shared, database is shared, is everything shared, or is everything vertical?
Right. So it really depends on which part of the pipeline it's in, but for the most part, it's shared. We have a MongoDB, and we've got a lot of different microservices that do one specific job, like parsing and cleaning things up, and then it just saves when one email comes in, about 10 other microservices might hit, and then it saves everything to that specific MongoDB, and then the client just pulls from a node server, and
Okay. And where do you feel like the biggest, like, you as the CTO of the company, like, where are you concerned the most in the next, like, 6 months? What do you think is going to break?
Yeah, so we're already facing some growing pains. Like I said, as a startup, we kind of joke around inside. We have chaos engineering.
I think that's pretty normal now.
Yeah, but
Seems normal.
so we have a lot of growing pains. So we think optimize later, and then a few months later you already hit a wall. So
Right.
we really have to strategize in terms of what is long-term infrastructure that you really want to commit to versus short-term infrastructure, or so it's a balancing act that there is no right answer half the time. So.
Okay. All right, and what about you guys?
So at Fanout, C++ primarily for the main real-time engine, a lot of Python for some of the back-end or less critical components. And we use Redis for a memory tier in each region, HA proxy for load balancing, 0MQ for most inter-server communication.
Why did you guys choose C++ on the back end? I mean, I love it because I actually, like, it was one of the first languages I learned to program in, but like that's not a typical choice these days.
Yeah, well, I'm proficient at it, and it's ideal for
So you're
a
now
real-time
inflicting it
system
on other
anyway.
people. I
So
see.
it's not even like it's using like the wrong, the hammer for the wrong job or something. This is
Okay.
actually the language you would want to use for this.
But what are specific things that, like, what are the benefits of using, let's say, C++ and like, as opposed to like Java, or as opposed to like Go in your case?
No garbage collection, so more predictable performance.
Okay. Okay, where do you guys anticipate, sort of like which pieces are you concerned with, like as you're like in the next bunch of months?
Well, I would say that actually so probably the thing that is most concerning is our stats system, which is more internal, but it's vertically scaled. So we're using a graphite server, and we just keep adding cores to it, and it'll explode at some point when we have too many servers reporting to it.
Is that like async, or is that like gets callbacks and like holds the main system?
It's I believe it's all pushed from all the boxes that are reporting.
Okay, so it's not gonna like bring down your production, but it's
Exactly. If that goes down, production's fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
everything's pretty resilient. So yeah, we just lose our stats, but we've had to like reduce the amount of stats we're sending to it.
Yeah.
And just that needs to be clustered at some point. We also have an issue where we track. For every customer, they can see when a channel, so we have a pub sub type system going on, when a channel has at least one subscriber or not. And so they can monitor that to know if they should publish data to us at all, because maybe nobody's listening on a certain channel, and they can save on API calls. That's a ordered list per customer, and as more customers become more active, that could break for a particular customer, but it won't break for like all customers.
Okay.
So at some point we'll have to figure out how to scale that. Maybe it gets
Okay.
sharded or something.
And are you guys in production right now?
Yeah,
with,
yeah.
Okay, how many customers are you supporting in production?
Can't talk about that here.
But like some number. You guys live with some number of customers.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys are in beta, and you guys are
So I have about 30 customers.
okay.
And so the biggest issue I have is email processing. So every new customer I add has maybe 100,000 email addresses that they want to send emails to on a regular basis. And everyone wants to send email around 10 or 11 o'clock. And so there's...
How do you deal with that?
So one of the ways that I do is I have different queues for different email senders. So everyone gets a queue so that no one is waiting in line for their emails to be sent.
But do you
and
just
then-
like spawn the machines on demand? And,
No.
or like do you have the machines?
I have the machines
pre-spawned?
currently running right now because I
Okay.
don't have auto scaling set up
Okay.
on DigitalOcean. But what I would love to do is, since Rails is so memory intensive, rewrite the email processing in a
Right.
language like Go, for example, that would allow me to spawn more instances and send emails faster.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we've gone deep on scaling, on sort of like scaling your stack and engineering, but I think you touched on another sort of facet of scaling, which is people. As you guys building out your companies, you know, you can't just write all the code yourselves, even though that would be my preferred way of coding, but we can't do that. So how do you guys deal, jokes aside, with like scaling of your team, and specifically go deep on like, how do you figure out like how to break things into components, like how to hire people, like how do you organize your engineering teams, and like how do you hire people?
Yeah, so definitely hire a little slowly. Basically, you're competing with really huge companies who have all these perks, you know, free food. Like, it's really hard to find the right people. I think hire a little slowly and build out your team. It's never worked out for me where you just hire 5 people and they all get along, and that's never worked out. But
so on this topic, like how
Yeah.
do you hire? Like this is one of the big topics with like Techstars companies. Like we just feel that it's really difficult to hire quality talent in New York, and it's really hard to compete with more established players. Like, so what do you guys do? Do you guys have distributed teams? Do you, or like why do people join your companies?
Yeah, so we're about half and half. We've got 5 people on site, and we've got another 5 people remote. Yeah, it's really hard to find really good people, especially on site. You got to find people who are kind of like you. I think, again, you got to think a little long term and really think about whether or not they're the right person for this job, and they have to know that too.
Right.
So I
kind
think,
of like you in what way?
yeah, so I mean, yeah, you're competing with huge companies. I think that if you write down your values, so there are huge companies and they have all these perks, but at the same time, I think if you write down the values, things like there are engineers out there who are bored at their job. So
Right.
things like, you know, we're a startup, we have no legacy code base. So if you write that down and say, you can use whatever tools you want, whatever languages you want, and you own it, right? And that's part of why we build things in microservices, because, you know, one little microservice, one Docker container, that's yours. If you want to throw it away, we don't have to throw away the entire code base.
Right.
So that's kind
Can't
of
wait to
how-
hear 5 years from now. Though.
Right. So, I mean, I think really just hiring the right people for the right job. A lot of it also comes from, you know, past jobs, a lot of experiences that you've gone through. I think, suffering a little bit.
Yeah.
It really brings people together, which I think is great. So I think that really helps in terms of hiring.
Cool.
The way I look at it, especially when it comes to hiring, is say you want a senior level engineer, you're probably not going to find a senior level engineer for the salary that or the equity you're willing to offer. So maybe look down one level, be willing to invest in that person, and that person will thereby invest in you and your company. Look for people, especially since we're entrepreneurs, look for people that are entrepreneurial, they're self-starting, they take ownership. And for me, in a corporate structure, I wasn't as effective as I am as an entrepreneur because I wasn't given as many opportunities to take ownership of the business.
So you basically tell to someone, listen, come work here. You're going to be able to like learn a ton and advance your career. And like if one day you want to start a company, this is a great path.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or if you take a chance on a junior developer or junior engineer, that can level up quickly. There's that initial period where you're investing and you're losing time. But if you do have enough time to be able to invest in that person can turn out to be your 10x engineer or your person your go-to person.
Okay, Justin, what do you guys do?
So most of our team is from our network, like friends I've worked with in the past or recommendations through mentors and stuff. And I think that's helped because we're a pretty small company. Equity is a big component of compensation, so you have to believe in the vision of what we're doing. And definitely the code is modularized so people don't step on each other's feet. We have a lot of GitHub repos. Even like our core proxy is like 5 different processes with their own code base. And so it's very easy to manage that. And if we change team members, they can take over just that part. And so those interface boundaries definitely help.
Cool. I'm going to do a really quick check because the clock is not running, so I have no idea how much time we have left. Does anybody know? You guys don't know either? We're in trouble. I'm gonna wait for a cue to keep going. You guys know what's going on over there?
Thumbs up or thumbs down? 2 minutes.
Okay,
2
cool.
minutes.
Okay, I gotta ask you guys the hardest question then. How do you guys, so startups are these like insane things that are really hard. How do you like scale yourselves? Like, I mean, part of it is like sort of like not a lot of people talk about this, but like as your company grows, effectively like you have to do the work that you had to do plus hire people, manage people, do all these things. How do you scale yourselves?
I like to divide by day. Like today I'm doing this and nothing else. If you're changing topics multiple times per day, it's just very
really
easy to
hard.
be unproductive. Definitely get away from work. I find I solve problems by just taking a walk. Even if you're spending the whole day, if you wake up and work and you work just before you go to bed, interlace some other stuff in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably the biggest thing as a bootstrap founder is focusing on my mental health and taking time away from the computer, because I could spend all day building things, fixing things, and not necessarily move the needle in my business. But taking time for exercise, weightlifting, soccer, family time, taking a shower, a long shower, just to think about it.
Showers are important.
Yes. A shower.
We need them.
Goes a long way in terms of how perspective is important, because it's a day-to-day grind. And so part of it is delegating. So for example, if you don't have the budget to hire a full-time person, hire a virtual assistant. Document your processes, delegate to that virtual assistant, and then also take some time away, because there's nothing worse than a burnt-out entrepreneur or engineer, because you're not making true progress.
Cool.
Yeah, for me, it's yes, time management is a really big thing. I think you gotta really trust your people. Also, automation, if you can, try to automate as much as possible. Things will go wrong if you automate too much, but I think definitely automate as much so that you have more time for yourself. Also, I think, like I said, going back to people, scale with your people. When you delegate your tasks and kind of draw energy from them as well, that really helps you get a lot more done.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Let's give these guys a round of applause.